first thing I want to talk to you about is, in doing my homework on you, reading that, like a lot of us, you're first captivated by Star Wars and Spielberg and a lot of the same reference points that a lot of us fans have. At what point did you realize that watching and loving these movies wasn't enough, that you needed to participate on the creative side in telling stories?
I feel very fortunate that I'm one of those people who's sort of known what he's wanted to do since I was 12 years old. While everyone was struggling through undergraduate school trying to figure out their major, I knew very early on what I wanted to do. The thing about directing, when you're really young, you don't really understand what directing is. I just knew that that's what I wanted to do. I wanted to entertain people with movies. And then
a
you
producer even less so. What's a producer? Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Nobody knows what these vague terms mean. But I have always wanted to be hands-on and do it and start doing it. I was raised around classical music. My dad was a concert violinist in the St. Louis Symphony Orchestra. He toured the world, and I got me into classical music. I played classical piano for 12 years, and I played flute. And I gave up playing piano to start playing with my parents' video camera, old Sony high 8 tape video camera, like the first consumer video camera they made. And that's that's kind of like when it all started, and it's kind of a tale as old as time. I'm sure a lot of filmmakers have a very similar story, but
the good ones.
I regret giving up piano because I really enjoyed playing, and it would take a lot of work for me to get back into it now. But I do think that did a lot to sort of shape my creative mind. I think music is really important for people, and especially when they're developing. Oh
yeah, on all kinds of levels. So I, as I just mentioned to you, I also, like you, have a background in TV news and entertainment reporting. How do you think editing stuff for TMZ and E! News helped prepare you for this movie, which tackles, reality shows and the thirst for content and viewers and that sort of thing?
Day of air TV is very different from documentaries and narrative film and reality TV, which the vast majority of my work has actually been in. Well, I'll tell you what Day of Air TV did for me as an editor, and that is it just made me extremely fast. When you've got, when I was working on E! News, you got to go to air at 2:00, which means you have to have everything delivered by 1:30, which means you have basically 2.5 hours to cut a package, if that. So, and then I quickly became known as a fast editor on staff. So like, I'm not cutting one, I'm cutting 2 or 3 packages. I'm cutting everything that's, coming in late. So it made me a really fast editor, and that's a good skill, because it's like being like it's like being a sharpshooter, or like a quick draw artist, you pull out your gun and shoot accurately. I knew my tool very well. But working in reality TV, which was a large part of the inspiration for Cleansing Hour, that kind of editing just helps you be a better storyteller. It helps you to understand the economy of storytelling and not wasting a moment on screen, and not letting a single line be wasted. Everything needs to be intentional. And further, it also helped me with just understanding what kind of coverage do I want to get. I edit everything in my mind before I even shoot it now. I go on set, I shoot exactly what I'm going to use, because I'm an editor. I know how it's going to cut together, if it's going to cut together, and that's been very beneficial. And that, especially shooting the Cleansing Hour, we didn't have a lot of time, we didn't have a lot of days. I had to be very precise about what we were going to shoot. So background in editing has been a huge help in shaping me as a director and a writer.
Oh, and you really hit upon something familiar to me when you talk about economy in storytelling. And, when you think about movies like Back to the Future or Die Hard, or, these movies that are like these perfect scripts, right? Working in TV news definitely helped me with the less is more, because before getting to sort of put my feet up with podcasting, and I have a very conversational interview style, right? So I would go and do like a set visit and sit there, with Quentin Tarantino or whoever and have a fascinating 30-minute conversation, and then come back and have to write a script from that interview to give to an editor like yourself to cut into a single minute for a TRL news hit or a 2-minute news package. Sometimes there would be the like, oh, you can put a longer cut on the internet on our website, which was sort of this throwaway second. Yeah,
right, but no one's going to see, right?
Yeah, no one's going to see. But well, and even right. and actually, I'm even, not to date myself too much, but even video wasn't. We weren't really putting video on the site yet, so it was like, maybe a written version would live there. But yeah, it's as frustrating as that can be, and as much as I prefer a longer form interview to really get to know someone and really get into their work, it does teach you about economy when you have to go, okay, how do I take this, 30-minute interview with Reese Witherspoon that was so great and tell this story in 90 seconds or 60 seconds. You really start to learn, even, man, sitting in those edit bays, and this had to be so beneficial for you making films, you really learn how long a minute is, right? Or you're just true. Like a minute of screen time is like an eternity sometimes.
It is so true. One of the things I do a lot now is I unfortunate being an editor, I can make a living while also, writing and getting the next movie going.
Sure.
And I do a lot of development sizzles, like pitching, basically pitch tapes for TV shows and movies.
Yeah.
And you can cram so much in, like they're like extended trailers. You can cram so much into a couple minutes. A lot of times those things only need to be 3-4 minutes long.
Yeah.
Depending on the size of the show and the cast and everything. But you have to just remember that, because a minute is an eternity.
Yeah, and there's sometimes where I've sat, for me as a host reporter guy, where I've sat in a meeting showing someone my reel, and you start cringing because you start realizing, like, say 45 seconds in, like, oh, this should be over now. Like, there's like another minute, where you really start to realize, how much less is more in a lot of those situations.
Totally.
So we've seen demonic possession in films before. Obviously, most famously, The Exorcist comes to mind for most people, but it's been in a lot of movies. What was the challenge? Talk to me about the challenges of casting an actress who could play a woman possessed without falling into familiar tropes and things we've seen before.
Well, the casting process was arduous, finding the right person to play Lane, and we had, I think, 2 or 3 casting calls. We saw a lot of actors. None of them were really clicking. And then my casting director opened it up and did an open call, and we got flooded with 3,000 submissions for the role.
Wow!
Because it was it was one of those roles where an actor can really sink her teeth into it. So it was the kind of thing that everybody wanted to do. And my casting director, Claire, sifted through all of the submissions, narrowed it down to the ones that she thought were best, and sent it to me. And as soon as I saw Alex's, I was just like floored immediately. It's like, she delivered the lines how I always imagined they would be delivered. And she's so creepy just from the outset. And I showed it to Natalie, my wife and co-producer, and she's like, oh man, that's terrifying, and it made her cringe. And I started comparing every other audition to Alex, and then finally I was like, why am I doing this? Like, she's it. That's it.
Yeah.
So getting the performance right initially was the first big step. And then as far as trying to do something unique in exorcism horror is challenging. So anybody that likes exorcism horror knows that you can maybe count on 1 or 2 hands like the good exorcism movies, and then the rest of them are mediocre at best. I really set out when making The Cleansing Hour to make a movie that I would want to see. Mm-hmm. Like that was a big one.
It's the key to everything, man. Write the song you want to hear.
Exactly.
Draw the picture you want to look at. Yeah, totally.
Yeah. So so that was a big deal for me, being such a big fan of this subgenre of horror. Like you, I really enjoy the supernatural stuff. I've been fascinated with it for years. And then specifically with the exorcism movies, I wanted to make something that was going to be an homage to the greats, but also have like my unique stamp on it. So
that's the key.
One of the things that yes, there are certain tropes in there that I don't know that you can really fully escape. Like for example, Lane has, when Lane is possessed, her eyes are like white, and then when she's not possessed, her eyes are normal. That was like the best indicator of knowing, okay, when is the demon talking and when is Lane talking. Mm-hmm. But I didn't go crazy with the makeup. That was one thing that I wanted to do. Make it feel like this could actually happen to somebody. Even The Exorcist goes over the top with the makeup, and in this movie, in my movie, we don't do that. And the other thing that I'm really proud of with Cleansing Hour is the voice. Is figuring out like what does the demon sound like whenever it's talking. And this is something that I don't know. People might not realize this, but the voice is dubbed. The demon voice is the story of how we got to there. Was I didn't really know exactly what we were going to be capable of doing in post. So we took Alex's performance and we played with filters and a bunch of different audio effects to try and accomplish a demon voice, and it wasn't quite working. So we finally got to the point that, okay, let's see if we can get somebody to dub this. Well, I had always, very early on, loved Pat Carroll's voice, who voiced Ursula in The Little Mermaid. All right, so
I've seen that movie many times, believe it or not.
Such a great voice.
Yeah.
So my casting director looked into it. She's in her 90s and she's retired, but her daughter is working and sounds just like her, if not scarier.
Wow.
So her daughter.
Poor unfortunate souls.
Right. Yeah. By the way, she is voicing Ursula in like the Disney's rebooting.
Yeah.
Little Mermaid. So anyway, Tara Carsian comes in and dubs all the lines, and I am giddy as a schoolgirl because I'm like, this sounds so freaking amazing. So then what we did was, and the sound designer Edmund did a phenomenal job. We had one sound designer who was just devoted to the demon voice, blended Tara's voice with Alex's voice in different ways depending on like what's happening in the story, and it turned out great. So like whenever
and that's what it would sound like, right? Because the demon's talking through the person, so it would be a mix.
Yep.
That's great.
So it was this really cool mix, and I'm really proud of it because it really is something unique. Like I've never heard a voice like this in a demon possession movie before, and it's spot on. So I'm very proud of that.
That's so cool. And as you mentioned, we're both fascinated by supernatural, esoteric, religious themes. Was there any kind of additional research that you did for kind of the religious side of this, or was it just stuff that you already knew because you were already fascinated by it?
I mean, there was a fair amount that I already knew just because I've written a bunch of movies that sort of like are in the same vein. I did research like actual demon names for the movies so that I could find, because I figured like the character Drew he has done all this demon research. So anything that Drew is capable of finding, like I should be able to find too. So like all the demon names that are in the movie are real demon names. Versus, some movies will make them up, but like these are real.
Sure.
So that was real stuff. And, the other big part about it for me is like, I also really try and make it theologically accurate in terms of like, worldview. And like, if you believe in demons, like, is this possible? Of course, there's like, it's a movie. So of course some of it's going to be made up and fake, but I try and like have it somewhat grounded in spiritual reality. If that,
the kind of movie where
that's not a contradiction.
Yeah. Where if you have a certain worldview, I mean, that to me, that's some of my favorite movies. If you have a certain worldview, you can watch it and have a different experience than someone who sees the world differently, and have it still. I mean, I could name a lot of movies that do that with ideological stuff, or where you could sit down like believing something and get just as much out of the movie as somebody who believes the exact opposite. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like,
yeah, totally.
I mean,
I like about,
Oh, go ahead.
Go ahead.
I was just gonna say, any good horror movie has to establish, or superhero movie, you have to have your own rules within your little world that you're building. Otherwise, those are the ones I think that really get away from themselves, is when there aren't any rules.
This is really subtle, and you wouldn't know unless I told you. But Like I've always thought that the trope in the exorcism movie of, you know, you're a demon and you've got all these powers, but there are these certain words that if someone says them, you're going to be floored and kicked out. Like you can't stand the sound of these particular words. So like I'm very subtly kind of making fun of that. And because you'll notice in the movie, like they're trying to figure out like, what is the special exorcism prayer that has to be said for this particular demon? And they have to find the name, and it doesn't work. They think it works, but it doesn't work. And I ultimately really like that because I think it's just so silly. You know, these guys lose in the end, and like their whole plan is wrong from the beginning.
Well, tell me about on the practical side, some of the challenges of setting a story in a single location. I mean, for the short film, it's like, okay, but but then when you got to figure out a feature film, right? Like it's kind of in one place. Like that's I mean, I think there's a beauty to it when you can pull it off, which I believe you did. But yeah, tell me about the challenge of that.
Well, I think there were several, man. You know, when you have a movie that's set in like one room, I think the first thing is just visually, you need to make the room interesting. Mm-hmm. You know, and so my production designer did such a great job of building a set that looks like it was a believable space where these guys would actually do their show. But then also, you know, because it does take place in one location, every single thing that happens in that location has to be planned ahead of time. Just like if you're doing a rock concert or a play, you know, every explosion, every stunt, every piece of moving set you have to know what's going to happen before you go and do it, so that you can move quickly and be safe. So that every day we had a different combination of makeup effects, special makeup effects, stunts, pyrotechnics. All these things happen every day of shooting that was really, really very challenging to get it all done on time. But we did it. We were shooting like 6 or 7 pages a day, and had a great crew. So that's a big challenge.
So, you know, I mentioned the short film. You know, how does it feel now to be at this part of the journey from short film to feature length to Fantastic Fest to Shudder? You know, how does this moment feel for you compared to all the steps along the way?
This is well, it's a couple things. It's a dream come true, honestly. I mean, it's great to make a movie and make a feature film and have it live on Shudder, which is really the best home for it. And then also it's kind of a relief too, because this is in many ways sort of like the end of the journey. Like once the movie's released, then it's like, okay, it's officially done now. And, you know, we can move on to the next one.
Right. And speaking of which, that's a great way to wrap up. Do you have ideas about what the next one is going to be? What you're
they're working on them right now. So I've got 2 scripts. One of them is a classic haunted house movie that's set against the Irish countryside that incorporates like Irish folklore and really creepy stuff.
As an Irish American, I'm intrigued again, once all over again.
Oh yeah. This is man. I want to go to Ireland and film this so badly. It's anyway. So that's in the works. And then I've got a lower budget, contained body horror with this amazing monster that is so unique and horrific that I can't wait to direct. It's going to be terrific. It's all set in one house during a blizzard, so it's another contained movie.
Rad. I love it. There's definitely something horrifying about the claustrophobia of being stuck in one place.
Yeah, definitely.
That's great. Well, dude, thanks so much for taking the time to do this. This has been awesome. You're like the perfect guest for this. So
well, thank you. Thank you for the opportunity, and you know, congrats on the podcast. I'm subscribed to it now on my phone, so I'll be listening to all of them.
Oh, awesome, man. Yeah, and we got to do this again, especially when there's new movies to talk about.
Yeah, please hit me up.
Awesome. Thanks, man. Have a good rest of your day.
All right, take care.